Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. Now onto the second one of our list, the one I always like, the top 10 best hit songs of 2020. So here's a question. It seems like the cliche line is 2020 was goddamn horrible, but at least the Hot 100 was great. And given that I mostly agree with this, let's ask the harder question. Why? Because I don't think there is an easy answer. The easy way to answer is that there were great albums in 2020 that fed into it, especially given that pop as a genre had a strong year. But great albums rarely translate to the charts being great, especially in a year where big name megastars were inconsistent with their presence. But, alright, maybe say without a major Drake release clogging the Hot 100, a bunch of fresh artists, new and old, can fill in all the gaps. But again, that can be a total crapshoot, with both real hits and real misses. But that also, many new names, also raises a question of turnover, where I actually tend to be a pretty big fan of a fast-moving and interesting Hot 100, as it generally allows for more variety and diversity, and ergo better years. But I'm sure you all saw me complaining about this year, all the stupid gamesmanship that went into taking the number one. And it's hard to ignore the time in which we are living in. I said in my worst list that there is no guarantee that anything that was released this year, be they new artist or new trends, actually last beyond this moment. And now with the vaccine, or just to gain some emotional distance, we all just go find new trends to start afresh. And artists who have been making music and haven't released it since, you might want to take note of that. That could be impacting you. But I'm not sure that's right either. If anything, the best music of 2020 came from surprise and balance. In the first case, it wasn't so much novelty as moments that maybe felt bigger than they actually were. It's not like we had anything else positive to focus on, so new pop music attracted way more attention than just another week of a hit that we knew was coming. It entered the cultural conversation, even the political conversation. And for once, pop actually kind of felt equipped for it. I put a fair amount of time into the new guard who seem very keenly aware of the zeitgeist and were able to leverage it to their advantage. But there's also something a little more egalitarian about how it disseminates these days, be it through TikTok, the cult audience slow burn, or the horde of rapacious fans that are more interesting than watch a label push the same old boring schlock to the very top year after year. But balance is also important. Yeah, pop had a great year, but it wasn't at the expense of country or trap or R&B or hip-hop or reggaeton, and even just the first slivers of rock that's trying to make a comeback. More to the point, it didn't feel like anyone had the luxury of coasting on fame or their laurels, or even the posthumous acts they punched above my expectations. It's hard for me to make a statement that this was the year pop music mattered, but there aren't that many years where I can look at the stuff at the top that was truly enormous and agree that it was actually of real quality, and 2020, it absolutely was that for me. The good stuff won out. And as per usual, we're only considering the songs that debuted on the Hot 100 this year, so alright, let's get to our honorable mentions.
I might be better on my own. I hate you blowing up my phone. I wish I never met your ass. Sometimes it be like that, but
okay, see, this is a prime example of how that balance can translate and make a song way better than it has any right to be. Pairing a pop country star with a frustratingly inconsistent trap crooner and an R&B singer who's also really inconsistent, all against a choppy acoustic rollick with production from Mike Will Made It, this should not work, nor be good. At the very best, it should be okay. But the odd thing is that with that cheap, fidgety trap groove, it's all in service of that central melodic loop, where the harmonies actually layer surprisingly well. Mostly because it seems like all three of these guys have actual chemistry and deliver some distinctive frustrations on the same main flavor. Plus, if I look to where these guys have made my year-end list before, it's literally been a run on vocal chemistry and pop cuts that are more quietly competent than outright shining. And that's kind of the vibe of the song too. Three guys commiserating on frustrated or bad relationships, but more with a helpless shrug of, yeah, you know what, we'll figure it out. Plus, I actually admire the restraint of everyone just shipping it as a pop song and not trying to gaslight anyone into thinking this was country. You know, it's the little things. I appreciate that.
don't show up, don't come out, don't start caring about me now. Walk away, you know how. Don't start caring about me now.
So, after after the flat-out amazing year Dua Lipa had in 2020, one of the few, I found myself surprised that this was really the only one of her hits I could justify putting on this list. And even then, while it's still a very good song, it's not better than Physical or Love Again, and that's hard for me to ignore as someone who prefers the albums. I'm also of the opinion that Future Nostalgia was kind of a lateral move in comparison with her self-titled album, and while the production budget absolutely leveled up, I might still like some of her older hits more. That's just the thing. But that being said, for what Don't Start Now is, with the muscular coursing bass line bouncing off the sharper percussion, and the old house and disco touches to give this post-breakup swell some real punch, Dua Lipa finally cemented herself as a legit pop star in the mainstream. Some of us might have called this 3 years ago. I am bragging about that. But if Don't Start Now is where she can seize that crown, I'm not gonna complain or gloat that much.
I wanna kick myself for falling so hard. Mama, can you die from a broken heart?
So I got a lot of people perplexed and annoyed by how much I actually really liked that last Maddie and Tay album, especially opposite the other releases I reviewed that weekend on The Pulse, which included Laura Marling, Black Dresses, and The Strokes. But the truth is that bloat aside, they make some pretty damn solid pop country, and while this is no Drunk or Lonely, it is a great little song. Yeah, it's absolutely adolescent, and they know the answers to every single question they're asking here in a post-breakup conversation with their parents. They know they're gonna laugh about this being this vulnerable and open someday, but I also think there is something to anyone retreating into a place of security when they get dumped. And there is something kind of honest about the basic questions of repair that they have to face. More than that, this is one of those songs that actually showcases the strengths of Maddie and Tay that you wouldn't otherwise know or remember if all you heard was Girl in a Country Song and you thought they were a gimmick. A lot of acoustic and organic country instrumentation with a lot of pedal steel, solid harmonies, lyrics that might be a bit overwritten but not to a distracting degree. There's a genuine sweetness to a lot of this song that I like and I can see playing very well to its target audience. And I'll admit for me, yeah, this had some staying power. Now granted, while we are in this territory,
We'd always go into it blindly. I needed to lose you to find me.
I think I have been the biggest Selena Gomez apologist among a lot of critics, but even I'm a little bit surprised that this one grabbed me as strongly as it did. It's an overwritten Julia Michaels co-write that would have felt a lot more genuine if Selena Gomez hadn't also been playing the remix game along with it. That being said, she wasn't playing that game nearly as badly as the X at the center of this song, and for every Weasley apology that Justin Bieber shat out in musical form, often coaxed through religion in the latter half of this year to further piss me off, I found this Kiss Off picking up more weight. Yeah, it's a bare-bones glassy piano ballad where it's clear Selena Gomez has a lot of healing left to do, but there's something a little bit righteous about how she references the lack of care that Bieber had for her art and life that feels personal enough to be real, especially given how she tried to gloss over the pain without doing the hard work of healing in the past. Coupled with Phineas probably giving her some of her best ever vocal production she's ever had outside of a Kygo song, this was a healing moment that I think Selena Gomez and a lot of others needed. Really good stuff.
I had a dream. I got everything I wanted. Not what you think. And if I'm being honest,
This is gonna sound crazy, but I feel so sorry for Billie Eilish. She's so young and stuck in the position of topping a monstrous breakout year, including a sweep at the Grammys that I don't think she expected nor wanted. It's probably gonna take her some time for her to decompress and think through her next steps in her artistic evolution, whatever they might be, and thus, I'm kind of okay with her throwing out some one-off singles to test the waters a little bit, or maybe just taking a breather throughout a tough year. Everything I Wanted feels like a fractured, glassy reflection of that insecurity, and how her brother Phineas provides her at least a little bit of security along the way, but it's hard to grapple with getting to the very top too fast and then feeling so precarious and disposable once you're there. Anyone with the platform at some point will feel this form of obligation and insecurity. And yeah, especially online, it feels painfully real. so why just the honorable mention if it grabbed me the way it did? That's tough to quantify. Feels like a one-off. Her best singles, they punch harder and feel a little bit more innovative in the production. And the release of Therefore I Am kind of makes me worried that she's gonna mine this for material, and I'm not sure how deeply that well's gonna wind up going. But this is still really damn good though. Hope A Quiet Year helped. I have high hopes, but no pressure. Take your time. There was a point where I seriously questioned whether or not I really liked this song, or whether or not it was just filling the void of great club boom Lady Gaga songs and I was just being nostalgic. Ultimately, realized it might have been some of both. Her best songs might be behind her. It's absolutely a step down from Shallow, which made the list last year. And it's hard not to view Chromatica as an underwhelming return to form, dropped at perhaps the worst possible time. But I do think Rain on Me is still really good. Ariana Grande balances out well with Gaga. The splashy, warping synths playing across the pre-chorus are fantastic. And even if the house drop is overmixed and underwhelming because Lady Gaga still wants to give Blood Pop a career for no discernible good reason, I like the sentiment where it's letting pain loose to stay alive and sane. It's a song that needed to explode a little more to fully sell it on the tier of her best pop songs, and I don't know who a hell among her handlers are fumbling the 911 rollout. That song's terrific, but I do think this is a track that got shortchanged by circumstances outside of her direct control, and if Lady Gaga and Ariana Grande ever do it live with a little bit more of a robust arrangement, I think this could be truly spectacular. As it is, merely just really damn good, I stand by it.
You're one of them girls that ain't trying to meet nobody. You're just here for the party. If I'm wrong, then stop me.
So there were career revivals that made sense in 2020, and then there was the one of Lee Brice, a B-lister in Nashville country who has been charting singles throughout the 2010s, but very few of them have been great, or if they have, they haven't translated or charted because he's on Curb Records, a label once notorious for nearly wrecking Tim McGraw's mid-career, but seems to have cleaned things up a little bit. Maybe they shipped off all their bad management people to Arista Nashville, given the shit show it is over there. Anyway, after scoring a strong hit with I Hope You're Happy Now with Carly Pearce that very nearly made this list, Lee Brice actually landed the follow-through. And you would think a song like this would just fall into bro country territory, which Lee Brice has done more than a few times. But again, I'll say it, there's a gradient of quality within that, and I think one of them girls falls on the right side of it. The hook has some real punch, the song has more organic swell and balance than most overproduced country in this lane, there's actually a driving bass presence, which has been a huge issue in bro country, and I like that for as much as he describes this potential partner as one of them girls, it hits the right balance between playing coy and just not having time for the boys' bullshit. If anything, he shows more vulnerability and consideration than she does for feelings. Lee Brice feels more grounded, warm, and naturally sincere and mature in his affection, where if he's wrong, he'll pull back, and if he's not, well, what fun can happen next? It's a flirt, and it works. Yeah, this is another song that really grew on me, and for a solid as hell mainstream country song, I'll take it. But alright, now on to the top 10 proper, number 10. So there's actually a decent amount of trap in my top 10. Just kind of wound up that way. But I also know it's gonna be this track that's gonna get controversy because not only is it the obvious critic pick, it's instead of all the interchangeable flex material he shoveled out this year, instead that will get praised now and then forgotten in 2 years. And when you tack on the fact that it's very obviously dated to a very specific time and it doesn't fully stick the landing, I know this is not the pick that makes me look in touch with the culture, or whatever the hell that is right now. Well, whatever. I never claimed to be on the zeitgeist anyway, and I'm picking what I like. And in 2020, this really was one of Lil Baby's best.
It's bigger than black and white. It's a problem with the whole way of life. It can't change overnight. But we gotta start somewhere. Might as well go ahead, start here. We done had a hell of a year. I'ma make it count while I'm here. God is the only man I fear.
I said it a few weeks back, I'm gonna say it again, not really a Lil Baby fan. His production and flow are kind of sterile and derivative, and while in recent years he's tried to integrate a more sober, aspirational focus if you read between the lines, he's just kind of tedious for me. Young Thug is more flair, Polo G is more thoughtful, the late King Von was a more interesting storyteller, and Young Boy Never Broke Again is overall more desperate and will take bigger risks. I somehow often wind up liking him more than I thought I would. But this song showcased exactly what Lil Baby could do at his best, and if there's a song that captured the exhaustion, fear, and barely controlled rage of the protest against police brutality in 2020, it is this. The jittery melody cascading where he lets the news footage run before his first verse, how quickly he shows how systemic racism has led to a cycle of violence in the streets and has directly impacted his life even as he's seen fame and success, but also how he now has to look at the bigger, messier picture given his platform. And yeah, I'm not particularly fond of the equivocation lines where he tries to go not all police and focus on voting as the solitary answer instead of the more righteously targeted stuff from Run the Jewels. Really, about half of RTJ4 could have been hits this year. Come on, people. But in a way, this works regardless because the song captures the panic of actually having to consider all those huge systemic questions on a platform with a directness that absolutely impacts his long-term career. Even with the half measures, Lil Baby took a risk to release a song like this that could play to a modern sound and his audience. And even then, I'm not really part of his audience and it worked for me. That speaks for the song's power. It was the song that actually made me go back to My Turn, Standard and Deluxe, and try to figure out what the hell I was missing. And while the hits actually did work a little better, this is a song that has the level of focus, tunefulness, and intensity that he's really struggled to convey outside of it. I'm not overlooking the song's flaws, that's why it's not higher on this list, but when Lil Baby made the effort to aim higher, he put himself in a bigger conversation. And that means expectations went up too, man. He set himself a new standard for that next album, and I'm curious to see where he takes us next. Number 9. But you know, while we're on the topic of artists who completely transcended my previous expectations,
I put the new 4Gs on the G. I trap into the bloody bottoms is underneath. Cause all my niggas got it out the streets. I keep 100 racks inside my jeans. I remember hitting them all with the whole team. Now nigga can't answer calls cause I'm balling.
I remember the mid-2010s where DJ Mustard frustrated me so much for just giving me the bare basics that so few artists could really elevate. But at some point in the past couple years, Mustard really found his second wind, a more developed and soulful side to his production, and on Perfect 10 he delivered a pretty damn good album last year, with Pure Water making my list there for Migos. Now Ballin took a while to grow on me, but I'll admit that was kind of true with Roddy Ricch as a whole. He reminds me of a much more controlled and focused Young Thug in terms of how he will bend his voice around melodies, but he'll also lock into the grooves more consistently without losing some of that flair, which has been my biggest issue with Thugger his entire career. But the odd thing is that, in terms of content, Ballin is pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. A pretty great flip of an old 702 song that leads into a trap bounce that I realize I tend to like a lot more when it's coming out of the West Coast scene and has a really consistent foundation, which this absolutely does. It also helps that as a writer, Roddy Ricch feels a little bit more creative and colorful with how he paints his gang come up. Not only do his rhymes more consistently connect, but there's a rougher timbre to how he frames his stories and puts him in a similar class as a Polo G or what Lil Durk's been working on recently. And I think the passing reference to the late Nipsey Hussle really helps here, even though I never got into Nipsey's music all that much. The other big difference is that Roddy Rich just has fantastic melodic impulses. So even if it is just another flex stuffed full of brand names, and it is, it's more memorable because there's more in tune with the production and his vocal delivery. Again, it took me a while to fully embrace both the acts here, but hell, this is terrific. And even if it took a while to fully stick, I'm on board. Number 8. Now, whereas with this, I got this song straight away, to the point I was legit shocked by how much and how quickly I liked it. A song, the second I heard it, I knew it was a hit, which means precisely dick, because without the right promotion, even the best would-be hits never get there, but this one got it, and got it organically, and thus...
Why you always in the mood? Fuck around like I'm brand new. I ain't tryna tell you what to do, but try to play cool. Baby, I ain't playing by your rules. Everything look better with a view.
This is the sort of pop trap I absolutely love. It's sugary, it's super catchy, and melodramatic without wallowing in it. It expands on the admittedly flimsy emotional framework of an up and down relationship where nobody's really communicating all that well and everyone is playing stupid games, so everything is disposable here. And that's kind of the charm. It's pure bubblegum, and in a year like this, I'm not against leaning into that for some fun. Compared to, I don't know, Him and I by G-Eazy and Halsey, which is all about the teenage relationship melodrama and was trying to convey way more than it could credibly back up. Whereas Mood sets rock bottom expectations and then really overachieves. We could be miserable and playing games to avoid the depression and the hellscape of 2020, or we could confront it directly, maybe have fun, and ride out whatever the hell this is. But the second you realize that it's a trap song that's actually leaning into its pop disposability and fun, because with that guitar line and the groove, the hook's a monster, all the weaknesses flip around and become strengths. Yeah, I agree with a lot of the criticisms. It's flagrantly shallow, it's pretty cheaply produced, with just enough crib from a pop rock edge slipping in a trap these days, but not enough to have a lot of significant muscle, and not to mention, it is stupid, but when it's just for a short sugar rush, it's got that same quick magnetism in the same way that Blueberry Faygo by Lil Mosey did. Or for a song that I'd probably defend a lot more in 2020 than last year, Ransom by Lil Tecca. And hell, while there's the big important pop songs, I've long proven with these lists I'm not too good for a catchy puff in the wind, and none of us can truly predict what will last from any given year. There was a time that everybody thought that This Is America by Childish Gambino would be one of the most important songs of the 2010s, and even though Childish Gambino put out an album this year, a lot of his presence in the scene has already basically been forgotten. And let's be honest, you haven't thought about This Is America in a long time. But really at this point, I'd be thrilled if 24K Golden manages to make El Dorado with a bunch of more of these cheap fun bangers, even as I get the feeling this might be a one-off that will have rapidly diminishing returns. But in late 2020, this was so much fun and actually has me curious for more. So yeah, check it out. Great stuff. Number 7. I get the feeling this song and this artist might wind up as one-hit wonders in the States, and that kind of depresses me. It's clear that she was getting primed for the big breakthrough, but when it happened, she was in precisely the wrong place to capitalize on that momentum. And then I watched the public turn on this song, likely because of the radio overplay, so this will likely become less unqualified praise and more me trying to convince people to re-listen with fresh ears, so thus...
Dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh, oh. I never seen anybody do the things you do before. They say.
Okay, I'll be real. I think what threw a lot of people about Tones and I was her inflection and vocal delivery. She sounds like Bjork with a nasal head cold, and instead of underplaying, she's leaning into it, along with some very spare pianos, the hand percussion, and a pulsating low end that makes her influences really obvious. And yet, I have always liked Dance Monkey because of the squawking delivery draws attention to how out of place she feels against something that's more slick and controlled, the industry, the human element against an electronic groove that's wrestling for control in the same way that I absolutely adored I'm an Albatross by Aaron Chupa. And unlike that song, the lyrics here actually build off that theme. It's a song all about busking and playing the entertainer for the audience, featuring the unforgiving demands of said audience that just wants her to shut up and play the same tune and dance for a pittance. And after a year where I have seen entertainers being asked to perform with less in harsher times, I absolutely have sympathy here in the same way I did for Fall Out Boy singles from Save Rock and Roll, when it was clear they were righteously pissed that their big artistic statement flopped because the mainstream was scared to take a real risk back in 2008. Yeah, the song might be kind of obnoxious, but it makes a real point, and the swell of vocals behind her to sound like a choir by the very end really drives it home that it's more voices than just hers. Again, if you're not looking for your entertainment to call you on your shit, I can see this not going down well. Radio overplay may have soured you on it, and I'm not sure she's gonna have another hit, but hell, I'm happy we got this one. Number 6. So the next two songs here, I made a point early on saying that 2020 was a year where pop music mattered, and I wouldn't even call either of these tracks traditionally pop. But this one in particular certainly sparked controversy, and for some ungodly reason, it's gonna spark controversy for me putting it so high on this list.
Yeah, you fucking with some wet ass
Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet ass pussy. Give me everything you got for this wet ass pussy.
Just mark my words, in 10 to 15 years, this is gonna get as many girls up to sing it at karaoke as they do Baby Got Back. A song that's distinctly provocative, controversial, quotable, and utterly ridiculously hilarious. Wherever you fall, it became an event where the backlash only served to enhance the widespread overall appeal. But I'd also argue it's a little more than that. Just pissing off Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, that's one thing. But I gotta just recognize that non-binary people and climate change are real, and I'd already check off both boxes with that. What WAP works is because it's just an extremely well-crafted and legitimately funny sex rap in the vein of a great Lil Kim or Gangsta Boo song, with Cardi and Megan offering some great contrast and flow, entirely too many quotable lines, and committing entirely to making this both filthy and kind of kink positive. There was absolutely a time I would have been way too good for a song like this, and there's a lot of folks who have shown their asses when they've spoken on songs like this, often for being way too vulgar or some nonsense, as if you all didn't let Lil Wayne, Future, and Chris Brown, if not thousands more, spew forth as many disgusting songs that were often not distinctly fun or funny. But you know what? There's a lot to like here. It's over the top in the right way that doesn't feel unapproachable if you're comfortable in your sexuality. The sample flip shows some understanding of that provocation, and because I grew up in the 2000s, it reminds me way too much of Joe Budden's Fire with Busta Rhymes, which has the same underlying sample. Just another incessantly horny song that I like way more than I probably should. And I won't deny that this going to #1 kind of matters. It became a cultural phenomenon for longer than I would ever expect, and while it took me a while to fully dive into it, I've enjoyed my time with it considerably. I can continue to make some questionable entendres, but I think it's better we move on to number 5. Okay, look, I said I was gonna stop with the double entendres. It just happened that this wound up next.
Pulling out the coupe at the lot, told him fuck 12, fuck SWAT, busting all the bells out the box. I just hit a lick with the box, had to put the stick in the box. Pour up the whole damn seal, I'ma get lazy. I got the mojo deals, we been trapping like the 80s.
If there was a song that grew on me more in 2020, I don't know what it is. I remember liking the box the first time it charted, but then it kind of cooled on me as it became a phenomenon that just so happened to block Justin Bieber's flailing attempt at #1 with Yummy. But then as I warmed up to Roddy Ricch, I came to like this all the more. For a flex that careens across topics and also winds up being insanely quotable, Roddy Ricch manages to make what could be a throwaway feel like a bit more portentous and dangerous, even if he's gonna open up with a squeaky noise against all the bombastic strings to undercut it. And to my surprise, he doesn't actually make the obvious box sexual double entendre, instead focusing on some pretty bleak gunplay and bragging that rides his uncanny knack for melodies and punchlines. And it's actually kind of fascinating as to why it works so damn well. Part of it, I think, is that he's got an understanding of the scale. The production gives the song some heft, so Roddy Ricch makes his punchlines more ridiculous, but also a bit more grounded. He shouts at it for a girl not to wear shoes in his house, but then he's paranoid about a private jet, so he's gonna drive instead. His hook is full of jagged flexes where he'll call back to an older 80s era of rougher trapping, but he also throw down Cash App and then shoot people. But probably the most memorable line is when he called himself a 2020 presidential candidate, said he put 100 bands on George Zimmerman, and I'm fairly certain it's been less ridiculous than some of the nonsense we've seen this past month, hell, this past year. That might be the real key to why this works so well. The box is bombastic and ridiculous and feels like any other Flex song until it's not, and the character matches everything and doesn't feel insane at all in 2020. And the fact that he wasn't even intending this as a single, where the video came late, and while the song probably owes TikTok the most, this was a song that told me that Roddy Ricch had real superstar potential. He had that uniqueness and flair. I'm happy he's taking his time for the next big swing, cause it's gonna be a wallop when it really comes. Number 4. So one thing that's been weighing on my mind looking over my past content is that I did develop a bit of a reputation as a moralist, as a critic in some circles, where it would appear I would come down more harshly on certain genres or songs for stuff that I'd find personally reprehensible in real life. And while there is some truth to that early on, I would argue it comes down again to how you do it. If it comes at the expense of the audience or just feels incompetent or outright disgusting, or the audience doesn't deserve it, I've got less patience. But on the flip side, when an artist can make their heel turn stick,
Cause I'm heartless, and I'm back to my ways, cause I'm heartless. All this money and this pain got me heartless. More life, cause I'm heartless.
this was another track that really needed some time to properly grow on me. I did mostly like it upon hearing it, but I didn't think the melody was super defined, and it felt like The Weeknd was slipping back into a comfort zone of debauchery we've heard from him countless times before. I don't know, this was a song that reminds me a lot more of Kendrick Lamar's Humble. It only gets better in the context of the album, and pretty much blows past its troublesome elements thanks to a trap groove with a metric ton of atmosphere and an enormous hook. And in both cases, it is a heel turn for the artist. Mike Will Made It turned Humble into an abrasive, jagged banger. Metro Boomin turned Heartless into a titanic, heady cloud of whirling cocaine, jewelry, fame, and entirely too many women, all at the cost of the attempt to go straight on After Hours, where he succumbed to his appetites in dizzying fashion. It's whirling, it's colorful, even as the bass courses and the trap percussion rattles, where he can hear her voice on the bridge trying to pull him back from that brink. And then the final chorus rushes in and drags him back to the nihilist nightmare storm. And another thing to note here is that the album actually builds on the continuity of The Weeknd's life before, across multiple albums at this point. He references years swimming in a dangerous game, so when he blows his chance at maybe finding goodness, the moral failure hits all the harder, especially as the intoxication is way too familiar. It's an old friend, but not one you might want to see. It's a song that balances out the glamour of the nightmare along with The Weeknd's best in this lane, and the internal focus forces him to confront the void within. And for a song this bleak and nihilistic to actually win me over, it's gotta be something special. And this absolutely is. Number 3. But you know, getting back to the topic of pussy.
Cause I got you sprung off in the springtime. Fuck all your free time. You don't need no me time. That's you and me time. We be getting so loud. That dick make my soul smile. That dick made me so damn proud.
Oh, fucking finally. No, that was not a double entendre. This was long overdue relief after years of edging closer to the charts, and you know what, there's just no way I'm gonna be able to get through the conversation about Pussy Fairy without this, is there? But the funny thing is that WAP has the pivot to comedy in the way that Jhene Aiko's biggest solo hit kind of doesn't. Most because it does not go for novelty. There's a purity to it. This is her talking about being so good at sex that she can make you fuck your free time and you'll actually enjoy the experience. It's confident, but not in a super assertive, in-your-face sort of way. And that honestly makes it way more inviting and convincing for how well she can control that room, and assert the fact that she's laid the groundwork for so much mainstream R&B in the past 4 or 5 years. Of course she sounds effortlessly comfortable in this lane. She helped build and reinforce it. And what she gets that so many of her peers don't is leaning into the organic warmth with the liquid guitar backdrop interwoven with more developed and textured percussion. Also, this is important, she sounds like she actually enjoys sex, and there's something refreshingly straightforward to her leaning into it without the baggage or a toxic relationship. Yeah, on the album there's a lot more going on, but it works both in and off the album. It matches the internal journey towards inner peace that also just so happens to include great mind-blowing sex. But I also appreciate there is a light emotional dynamic and a touch to the song. It's well-paced, it's focused, it's generally likable all around, where the atmosphere is so intoxicating that you can just mostly get around the fact she's talking about Big Sean. Well, you know what, whatever. She's at least kind of helping him make better music, so I guess everyone wins. Because this is hot as hell, and I've liked it for a long time. Number 2. This is one of those songs where I knew it had a shot for the year-end list, but it would depend on timing whether or not it would make the list or not. It was never a massive hit or got the quiet airplay stimulus package like Pussy Fairy. It was gonna be close. And that's often the case with a lot of country songs, but in a year with a lot of Luke Combs, this was probably by far his best swing and probably his best song.
Just close your eyes and say a prayer. It's okay, I know you're scared when I'm not here, but I'll always be right there. Even though I'm leaving, I ain't going nowhere.
There's honestly a part of me that kind of wants to downplay this a bit. It's rough around the edges, it's a bit cliched, it pays to a lot of the same father-son sentiments that I loved on Live Like You're Dying by Tim McGraw with a military edge to boot. This formula, it's not surprising. But goddamn it if Luke Combs doesn't make it work. A simple 3-part setup that shows a kid scared of monsters beneath his bed, growing up off to war, and then accepting his father's departure from this world. More focusing on the presence of fatherhood that will always be there, that's both echoed and mirrored in some subtle but really affecting, beautiful ways. And Luke Combs sells it as good as anything, partially because he's always felt the most comfortable on more organic, neo-traditional country tones. But this might be the best production he's ever had. A lot of the creaking acoustics, a defined bass line, solid pedal steel interplay, touches of piano and organ to add to that swell, a terrific mandolin solo, and then how it all builds on that final hook. It feels like the sort of album cut that's just too good to be shipped to Nashville radio as a single. I've seen so many songs like this just not work, but he did it. And it did work, and arguably became his best hit to date and proves that neo-traditional country still has a very real through line in the mainstream, all the while being a great tearjerker ballad that very nearly made my favorite songs of 2019. Everything Luke Combs delivered with this track, it was a net positive. So what could be better? Well, before I get to that directly, I'm adding a new special category to my list of the best hit songs of 2020. Because it's only a cut of what the United States year-end Hot 100 registers. And as I've said before, I'm Canadian. Ergo, here's a few songs that made the Canadian year-end Hot 100. They missed this list, but could have easily made this list if we'd centered it in a more sane country, like, say, from Loud Luxury, Cold Feet.
They're walking out on me. Hide nor seek. There's a haunting melody.
From Taylor Swift, Lover.
Lover.
From Miley Cyrus, Midnight Sky. And, of course, from Brockhampton, Sugar.
You're the only one I want by my side when I fall asleep. Tell me what I'm waiting for. Tell me what I'm waiting for. I know it's hard, but we need each other. No, it's hard, but we need each other.
So, right, now that I've asserted the obvious truth that the Canadian Hot 100, the Canadian charts, they're always better, pay no attention to that La La and Mamacita in the corner, but let's move on to number 1. I mean, duh. At this point, there is nothing left for me to say about this one. It was a song that I was kind of petrified wouldn't catch on, only for it to take the number 1 and break records for how long it was in the top 10. It flips the sample of a legit classic song in Take On Me by a-ha and doesn't feel overshadowed by that influence because the atmosphere it creates is entirely its own. It's huge and sweeping and infectious and timeless in the way that the best synth pop is, and the fact that critics and the general public came together to claim this is the biggest hit of 2020 speaks to at least one point of consensus for which I'm not sure we could have dared to dream. But that's not the story I want to tell. Begin how this song grabs me uniquely because After Hours was released in March. In the middle of a citywide lockdown where, for me to stay sane, I would go for long, late-night walks down the abandoned downtown streets of Toronto. And I'm not sure there is an adrenaline rush that matches the rush of Heartless, Faith, and Blinding Lights that hit in rapid succession on that album on that frigid, crystalline night the first time I took them all in, where the wind tears between the skyscrapers and no cars fill the empty streets. After songs about debauchery that only seem to accentuate the lonely emptiness within, Blinding Lights will hit you, and you don't even need a car to make your body rush with adrenaline. The world might be empty around you, but the search for anything to feel that human touch, it blurs your vision. Enraptured by a singular, unique moment that so long as I live, I'm never going to experience that again. And the situation's so unique, I don't think it's possible for anyone to ever experience. It's just mine. I will have that for the rest of my life. It wasn't even the first time I heard the song. I've had it in personal playlists for over a year now, but the magic I felt that night, I'm gonna remember to the very end. It's not even a spoiler for me to say it's gonna make my list of my favorite songs of 2020. Only a question of how high, but in the meantime, it might not be a surprise, but it's no less right. Best hit song of 2020, and the decade wide open for whatever is to come. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Please, I'm curious about what your best hits of the year are. Again, I can imagine there might be some overlap, but leave them down in the comments below. Happy to hear them. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in supporting the channel, or maybe help adding in some requests for when I get the albums back on track, link to my Patreon is right over there, where again, you can help impact my schedule, but also hang out on my Discord, and I might have other rewards coming in the near future. Beyond that, links over there. Until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse. Please stay tuned for the list to come, and I'll see you next time.